Welcome. I'm Mary Schaefer, Editorial Director of AP Now and author of many business books, including one on accounts payable and Sarbanes-Oxley, Strengthening Your Internal Controls. I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about that book and, more importantly, a little bit about internal controls. We're going to spend a few minutes in total, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Act, a little bit about what it meant for the accounts payable function, and then we'll talk about some overriding principles or guidelines when it comes to internal controls and best practices in the accounts payable function. When Wiley first approached me about writing a book on accounts payable and Sarbanes-Oxley, I wanted to add the tagline, strengthening your internal controls, because for me, when it comes to the accounts payable section, the most important part of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was Section 404, and that was the one that focuses on internal controls, and to my way of thinking, that's where most of the impact came on the accounts payable function, and that's what I write about a lot, accounts payable. So let's start off by taking a quick look at what the Act meant, what management had to do to kind of give you an overview or place it in context when we talk about accounts payable. In the Act, it basically requires that management has to attest to the accuracy and of the internal controls and attest that they are A, in place, B, operational, and C, effective. Now, this seems kind of straightforward, and you may wonder what's the big deal. But as you know, it is a big deal because a lot of controls weren't in place, and we had a lot of disasters in the beginning of the 21st century, which kind of led to this whole thing. The Act requires certification by management of both the annual and quarterly statements. And this sometimes means, when it comes to accounts payable and other functions, that some executives are requiring sub-certifications from the managers who actually handle those functions before they go ahead and sign off for the SEC and others who are involved. And lastly, and this is very important when it comes to some of the regulatory issues that affect accounts payable, it also states when they sign, they're also signing that the organization is in compliance with state and federal laws. And that's something to keep in mind, and it's important. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So for starters, let's look at some of the overriding principles as it affects accounts payable, if you will, but overriding principles for Sarbanes-Oxley and most specifically Section 404. We need to focus on that we have the appropriate segregation of duties, that we have the appropriate internal controls, and they are strong and will protect the organization against fraud and many other types of problems that can occur, and also that we eliminate some really bad practices. In the accounts payable function, there are practices that some of us have in place that we really shouldn't. And it's just they've been there forever, and they make it easier for the organization as a whole to run, although they don't always make it easier for the accounts payable function. And if we have not already gotten rid of these, we really do need to. I'm going to just enumerate on a few of them. There's a lot more. But returning checks to requisitionists, petty cash boxes, having many rush checks. Now, occasionally you will need to have a rush check, but many of us have many more rush checks or rush payments than we need to. An uneven enforcement of the T&E policies is a red flag, if you will, for lack of appropriate controls in the function. And lastly, remember I mentioned earlier that we had to ascertain that we were in compliance with all state and federal laws. Well, if you're not reporting unclaimed property, if you are not filing all the 1099s that you should be, if you're not paying, collecting, and remitting your sales and use tax as you should be, you are not in compliance with all the state and federal laws. So your management team really should not be signing off on those certifications. When the Act went in, we did see some big changes in the accounts payable function in many organizations, not only those at public companies who were affected, but some private organizations finally got the wake-up call and they said, okay, we need to change some things. And the biggest change that we saw across the board was in the way travel and entertainment was handled, especially employee reimbursements. We're also starting to see more reliance or more compliance, if you will, with IRS requirements when it comes to T&E. A lot of the sloppy procedures of the past have gone away. We're seeing uniform compliance, and we're also seeing more organizations pay attention to their policy and procedures manual, be it for T&E or for the whole accounts payable function. And we're starting to see more frequent updates of these policies to reflect the practices that the company wants its employees to adhere to. We're seeing more use of best practices, and we're seeing the elimination of some of those what I call really bad practices that we talked about on the prior slide. Well, what now? If you've done, you're at the overview, you've done this, what are you in compliance? Well, maybe, maybe not. But what you really need to do, and this is not only true of whether you want to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, but even if you're not subject to its strictures because you're not a public company, if you still want to have strong internal controls and you want your organization to be as profitable as possible, you need to pay some attention to accounts payable. And this means rolling up your sleeves, delving into the nitty-gritty of each step along the way, how you get your invoices, how you process them, your approvals, your master vendor file, how you make payments, your timing of your payments, etc. So you need to go through each step and make sure that you have the strongest possible controls there. You need to identify any weaknesses and then figure out what changes you need to make. Now, I could probably spend a day talking to you about those changes on the nitty-gritty level, but that's not, that we don't have time for that. You don't have all day to spend with me, but that's part of what I wrote about in the book, Accounts Payable and Sarbanes-Oxley, Strengthening Your Internal Controls. And even though we do talk about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act a little bit, we mainly focus on the internal controls and the nitty-gritty of it. Obviously, I'd love to have you buy it. You can get it at any of the online bookstores, or you can get it at a 15% discount if you go to this link and order it. Click on the link and then order the book. Or for that matter, you can get that 15% discount on any of the John Wiley books, including all their wonderful tax guides. Whether you buy the book or not, I'd like to invite you to sign up for our free weekly e-zine. It's about accounts payable issues. We always have some tips in there, some things to help you make your function better, and we have news about upcoming AP events. So whether you buy the book or not, we still invite you to sign up, and we hope you join us. Thank you for spending these few minutes with me talking about internal controls and accounts payable.